Would you fly to the moon for the salary of a mid-level government clerk? When Neil Armstrong took humanity's first step onto another world in 1969, he was earning about $27,000 a year. The story of what astronauts are paid is stranger than you might think. In 1959, NASA chose its first astronauts, the Mercury 7, all military test pilots. They did not get special astronaut salaries. They simply kept their existing military pay, which for most ranged from about $8,000 to $12,000 a year. To make up for the modest pay and the enormous risk, the Seven signed an exclusive deal with Life magazine for their personal stories. The contract was reported at $500,000, split among the men, worth roughly $24,000 each per year, often more than their salary. For these men, money was never the reason. They were test pilots who had already flown experimental jets at the edge of death for ordinary pay. Space flight was the ultimate flight, and they would have done it, as several said, for almost nothing. $27,000 in 1969 sounds tiny today, but it was worth far more then, roughly equivalent to about $230,000 in today's money. A good salary, certainly, but hardly a fortune for the most dangerous job on Earth. An astronaut might train for years before ever leaving the ground, and many in the backup crews trained just as hard for missions they would never fly. Whether you flew to the moon or waited your whole career on the ground, the salary was exactly the same. By the time of Apollo, a few astronauts had become civilians. Neil Armstrong, as a civilian, was the highest-paid astronaut of his era, earning about $27,000 a year. His crewmates Aldrin and Collins, still military officers, earned closer to $18,000. Astronauts on missions also received a small travel allowance, the same per diem any government employee got for a business trip. But NASA deducted the cost of accommodation, and since the government provided the spacecraft, the deductions ate almost all of it. After Apollo 11, the first journey to the surface of another world, Neil Armstrong filed a travel expense voucher. For the trip from Houston to the moon and back, his reimbursement came to about $33. There was no hazard pay, no mission bonus, no extra dollar for walking on the moon, for orbiting it alone, or for risking your life atop a rocket holding millions of gallons of explosive fuel. The salary was the salary, mission or no mission. The risk was not abstract. Across the Space Shuttle program, 2 of 135 missions ended in disaster, a fatal accident rate of roughly 1 in 67 flights. Few jobs on Earth carry odds like that, and certainly none that pay an ordinary government wage. There was a darker problem. No insurance company would sell these men an affordable life insurance policy. The odds of dying were simply too high, and a normal policy would have cost a fortune the astronauts could never pay on their salaries. So the Apollo crews invented their own. Before each mission, they signed hundreds of postal envelopes, known as insurance covers. If they died, their families could sell these signed mementos to collectors. It was the only life insurance many of them had. On the 27th of January 1967, a fire swept the Apollo 1 capsule during a ground test, killing Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee. They were the first American astronauts to die in the line of duty, and the question of what was owed to their families became real. As federal employees, the families were entitled to government death benefits, a payment, and an ongoing pension. For the military astronauts, the armed forces added their own survivor benefits. It was steady, but it was modest, the same support any government servant's family would receive. You might think the first men on the moon could grow rich on their fame, but NASA tightly restricted how astronauts could profit from their government work. They could not endorse products or sell their official image, and the famous life deal was wound down. Their celebrity rarely became wealth. By the 1980s, the astronaut corps had grown into scientists, engineers, and teachers. They were paid strictly on the federal civil service scale, the same pay tables as any government professional, based on experience and rank, not on how many times they flew. A shuttle-era astronaut typically earned somewhere between about $66,000 and $100,000 a year, depending on their grade. A respectable professional salary, but far less than a pilot could earn at an airline or an engineer in private industry. On the 28th of January 1986, the shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds after launch, killing all 7 aboard, including the schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe. The nation watched it happen live, and once again the question of compensation followed the grief. The families received federal survivor benefits, and most reached a settlement funded jointly by the government and the rocket booster contractor. The agreements were reported to total several $million across the families, much of it paid quietly, out of public view. On the 1st of February 2003, the shuttle Columbia broke apart during re-entry, killing its crew of 7 just 16 minutes before they were due to land. It was the second shuttle lost, and the last straw for the program. The Columbia families again received federal death benefits and pensions, and Congress and NASA arranged additional support. By now, there was a clearer system. Astronauts who die in service are honored as federal employees lost in the line of duty. Today, NASA astronauts are still paid on the federal civil service scale. A new astronaut typically starts at around $105,000 a year, and an experienced one can earn closer to $160,000. Solid but ordinary, pay for an extraordinary job. Even now, there is no extra pay for actually going to space. An astronaut on the space station earns the same salary they would sitting at a desk in Houston. The reward is the view from the window, not the number on the paycheck. On the other side of the Cold War, things worked differently. Soviet cosmonauts received their state salary, but also generous bonuses for each flight, along with apartments, cars, and the title hero of the Soviet Union, paid out by a state eager to celebrate its champions. Russian cosmonauts in later years were even paid by the task. Reports described bonuses for each spacewalk and penalties for mistakes, so that a cosmonaut's earnings depended in part on exactly what they accomplished in orbit, a sharp contrast to the flat American salary. Krista McAuliffe, aboard Challenger, was not a career astronaut but a high school teacher chosen to fly. She took unpaid leave from her teaching job for the mission, a reminder that for many, going to space meant setting ordinary life and ordinary income aside entirely. Now a third model has arrived. Private companies pay their own astronauts, and wealthy customers pay tens of millions of dollars for a seat. For the first time, the people going to space include some who are paying to go, rather than being paid. The contrast is stark. A professional NASA astronaut earns a fixed government salary of perhaps $150,000 a year. A private citizen, meanwhile, may pay upwards of $50 million for a single seat to orbit. Same rocket, opposite ends of the ledger. Across every era, one thing has stayed the same. No astronaut has ever flown for the money, because the money was never enough to justify the risk. They flew to explore, to serve, to be among the first humans to leave the Earth behind. So the next time you watch a rocket climb into the sky, remember that the people on top of it are not getting rich. They are ordinary public servants on ordinary salaries, doing one of the most extraordinary jobs that has ever existed.